looking at the industry as a whole as well, what do you feel are the main barriers to innovation or the main challenges that are facing companies in the fintech space today?
I'd say one of them is funding now with AI. Everything is now AI. All the money seems to be going into that one thing. As Alex mentioned, a couple of years ago, fintech was absolutely booming, and then you've seen valuations from Stripe, Checkout.com, so many other fintechs being slashed, which has effectively affected other businesses as well. So I think for any small business that's got some really cool ideas in terms of what they want to innovate, something that's quite different, you obviously need the capital to do that. And if it's not there, it's going to be very difficult to get that off the ground.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I think some other ones that I would call out, I think everything around regulation in the financial space is very important in terms of protecting our consumers, but it also can really slow down companies that want to be doing something innovative, but have, if you have to wait a year to get permission to serve your customers, it just, everything just moves much, much slower. So I think, when it comes to things like FCA regulation, just the timelines that are associated with that, and like the lack of resourcing in those departments, because there's huge demand for authorization to be like, could be a real, even more of a booming sector than it is in the UK if that kind of bottleneck was released a little bit. And also maybe just to echo a little bit what Alex said before, I think the fact that there's so much fragmentation globally makes it hard to release products that can be used in a consistent way by companies that are more global, which increasingly is most companies. And so the fact that every single country has its own quirks and its own limitations, and their banks have done things slightly differently, and you need to adjust them, it just means that it takes a lot longer to be able to have global coverage and to offer something that is as well defined as what exists in the market today, which is largely based on traditional payment methods, and they've been around long enough to have a global infrastructure that is reliable and solid enough that it doesn't need all of those countrywide peculiarities.
Yeah, I think my answer, I echo some of what you've both said, and I agree absolutely with what you're saying in that consumer space. I think it's that we have a slightly different scenario in the B2B payments world. And the simple answer of what is the biggest challenge to innovation is probably the same as Justin's. It's ongoing regulatory change and the need to respond to that. It's not that regulation is stopping us innovating, it's that there is so much regulatory change that we have to be on top of and ahead of. What time is there left over to innovate, in inverted commas? So what my team and I have been doing is trying to flip that on its head, and you'll either love this or you'll think it's mad mental gymnastics. But we had been operating under this, I think, false dichotomy of responding to regulatory change, getting our customers ready is just pure table stakes. You've got to do it, and we have to do that to the sacrifice of sexy, innovative, new features, etc. And to a certain extent, that's not untrue. But what we can do is change our mindset to say, well, actually, for example, ISO 20022 comes into play from November this year. So this is an example of a changing regulation wherein if customers are not ready, something like 75% of all CHAPS payments in the UK will fail. So there's quite a lot of change needs to be implemented now and then. So in a very real product sense, this is table stakes. You've got to do it. But my question and the challenge I've given to the team is, well, how can we innovate within that? What can we do between now and then that's interesting? How can we turn that from a risk that our customers are facing into an opportunity? How can we innovate around a table stakes problem? So it's maybe that's a cop-out, right? And maybe that's because I'm one of those annoying cup half full people. But I think for me, the answer of what's the opportunity and what's the barrier are almost the same thing in my world.
Justin, just to go on a couple of the points that you mentioned there around like global divergence, obviously that's quite hard to do anything about. But on those other areas like regulation, access to funding, it seems like I'm noticing quite a lot of kind of technical solutions coming up to improve access to funding via like technical solutions, a lot of like reg tech companies as well. How much of an impact are those solutions having? Can you get a sense of that at all?
Yeah, you know, they are around. I think they're trying to figure it out, but they're operating in a similar environment to everyone else, which is this, as we've said, like the constant change and trying to figure that out. And I think it probably depends on the level that, you know, when it comes to funding, you know, it probably helps at some levels, whereas at some other levels, you're still in the very traditional VC world that isn't kind of in this, hasn't been broken from the traditional model that it's followed for the last several years. So I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that it has completely shattered the way that it works right now. I think probably on the edges there's starting to be some innovations, and if there is more that can be done there, I think it will be great. But I wouldn't say that I've seen enough that it has significantly changed things from, you know, the status quo as it has been for the past few years.
Cool. And the final question that I have for you is around other innovations that we've not touched on. Are there particular areas that you feel that you're personally excited about, or you think that we should be keeping an eye on that could have a significant impact within the fintech space over the next couple of years or so?
I think from my perspective, one that is going to happen is recurring payments for open banking. So that's been asked for so long by so many different businesses. It just makes sense. In a way, it's you can call it digital direct debit. That's effectively what it is, where you can actually track the payments as well. So I think that's a big one. But as Justin mentioned, there's so many regulations and testing that's required. It's just taking forever to come out. At the moment, there's only one bank, NatWest, who's actually on board with doing it. I believe the pilot for that goes live towards the end of the year, which doesn't really help when you've only got one bank on board. It's a bit of a strange one. So I don't know how that pilot will go, but as soon as that comes live, I think that's when open banking will really take off, because there's so many businesses that rely on the reform aspect. One that I hope comes to fruition one day is if open banking can be linked to devices so that you can almost do Apple Pay type payments. I don't see why something like that shouldn't be possible, because at the moment Apple Pay links to a card, so a scheme. But if somehow technology could link directly to a bank account and the payments can be made even quicker, so you don't have to go through, I wouldn't even say it's that long of an authorization process with open banking, but just to shorten it, because we live in a world now where people just want to do everything now with as, you know, as little clicks as possible. That's one, I wouldn't say pushback, but some of the feedback I get from people when they say, oh, it's very quick, but it's not quite Apple Pay, is it? I think that's what the range scheme. So it kind of begs the question, can the two technologies someday marry up and create a service that is effectively just as quick as it is now, if not quicker, but the main bit being a lot more cost effective?
Yeah, I would say I'm also excited about those things. I think they are some really exciting areas. Other things that I would maybe call out, I think there's been some encouraging sounds from Europe with regards to open banking and kind of improving the way that things are working over there, and standardizing, speeding things up, which I think is also really important. I think seems like all of us live in the UK, and so we are used to a very I would say a very good banking system, whereas in Europe it's not necessarily always the case. And so I think it sounds like things are likely to improve over the next couple of years there, and help us offer a more standardized and you know, high quality experience. I think, you know, this isn't necessarily new, but I think I'm starting to see more inventive uses of AIS. I think, you know, it's been around for a little while, and there's been lots of kind of the, you know, just looking at it and looking at, okay, let's categorize people's spending, let's report on things like that. But I think I'm starting to see more creative uses around what can we do with that data. We are currently in the process of launching something that's trying to make user onboarding easier by utilizing some of the data that can be pulled from that, and just reducing the amount of friction that a fintech has to put a customer through to onboard them, to get all of the details that, you know, can maybe just be pulled automatically from something like AIS. So I think the more and more that we have time to think about these technologies and interesting different ways to use them, I think we're going to start to see some really great products come out of that.
For sure. Yeah, I would agree with what Dali and Justin have both articulated. You've done a great job of giving that macro view of the possibilities out there. What I'm most excited about at the moment is probably all a bit closer to home and might seem a bit inconsequential. But again, working in the B2B space, there has long been, I think, a false assumption that user experience doesn't matter for corporate clients, that you're so embedded that customers are never going to stop using you because your experience is bad. And that might still be true, but that's not a good reason to have poor user experience. And what I love at the moment is this challenge and opportunity to constantly refine and make easy and efficient the things that we're asking our corporate users to do. Because those corporate users have incredible solutions like the ones Justin and Dali have been talking about in their personal payments and banking lives. And they bring those expectations into the workplace and get very frustrated when they have a worse experience. So for me, I love the fact that now I meet CFOs and I meet financial controllers who are my age or a couple of years older, who have these very clear expectations around usability, and that isn't those things are no longer divorced. So I'm really enjoying that at the moment, of being able to look not only at what's coming next in terms of pure innovation, but how do we take the applications that are out there, our own and those we integrate with, and say, let's make this more cohesive. Let's make this a fun place to be when you are doing your banking. Like, it's, banking can be stressful. You don't want to have a bad user experience at the same time. So yeah, call me a big old product nerd, but that's what I'm excited about this year.
Cool, thanks for that, Alex. So definitely seems like there's a lot kind of coming within the fintech space, so definitely want to keep your eyes on. Really appreciate all of your time for joining and sharing your insight. It's been really enjoyable. So thanks again, guys, and we'll speak soon.